You're listening to Nurture Your Zest. I'm your host, Ashleigh King, and I will introduce you to a wealth of interesting, fascinating individuals from all walks of life who will share their stories, how they've overcome challenges, and you will find out their top tips for success. Through this podcast, you can gain tips to grow and change your life and the way you see the world, and help you to nurture your zest. Hello and welcome to Nurture Your Zest. My name is Ashleigh King and I am the podcast host of this show. I'm so excited because we've got a very special episode for you today. I'm going to be talking to the amazingly courageous Simon Bourne and hearing about his fabulous shoes, fashion, mental health. We're actually going to go in a deep dive into all things Simon, and I've been told that there's no questions I can't ask. So this is a special episode as well because we've never filmed in our kitchen before, the shrimp bar, so I'm really excited about that. So thank you so much for joining us, and I'm now going to chat to Simon. So hi Simon, how are you?
I'm good. Yeah, really nice to be in the shrimp bar. This is really cool. What an environment.
Yeah, it's really nice actually to have a studio. I was reflecting on that recently. You know, we've been in here 8 months now, so it'll be coming up to a year soon. It's been such a journey, such an adventure, but it's also been lovely to upcycle things, do all kinds of interior design. And on that note, the reason we're filming in here is because I wanted to film on the leather sofa, because we're going to hear about your journey with leather shortly. Yeah. But also, when I moved into the space, I contacted you, didn't I? And
That's
I said,
right,
can I dye the sofa green? And you were very clear that I should not.
My advice was don't. Yeah,
don't.
That's right, yeah. So, I mean, this is a Chesterfield. It's a 19th century classic English design of furniture. And there are lots of different types of leathers out there in the world, from full grain, russet leathers, semi-anilines, printed leathers, and there's certain types of leather that you just shouldn't tinker with, and this is it. I mean, this has such a natural patina at an age that, I was quite forceful on don't.
Yeah, I'm so grateful for that advice though, because sometimes when you don't know, you can get carried away and do all kinds of different things.
I think it's the upcycling bug, isn't it?
Yes.
Because I do quite a bit of upcycling as well. And naturally, you sort of see this old piece of like antique gem, and you think, what can I do to it? How can I reinvent this thing? And then inevitably you kind of, you start something and then you can ruin it or whatever. And sometimes like these old things just look right as they are, and certainly the Chesterfield for me is one of those things. Yeah.
Absolutely. Sometimes a bit of cleaning polish or, for instance, the table your lovely shoes are on, that's upcycled, bit of paint, wood stain.
Yeah, you don't need to do a lot to it. I mean, look how beautiful it is.
But also these are all postcards that have just been put framed because I love vintage fashion and old magazines. Yeah. And so it's amazing what you can do with some spray paint and some old postcards,
Absolutely, yeah.
So I'd love to, for people who've never listened or heard of you or, ever seen you online before or don't know anything about your fabulous businesses, we'll get to, your fabulous shoes in a moment, but who's Simon?
So I am a father of two, a husband of one, and I am a natural creative. I'm somebody who really buzzes off anything that's kind of like that's got an output. It's got an end product. I love to derive things. I'm determined. I'm hungry. I'm like very forceful and quite dominant. In terms of like my ideas and that's basically got me to where I am today. I think back across my entire career, actually, I'm 37 now, and I say that because I always forget, but I'm 37. And my array of different careers that I've been involved in is quite mad, really, for somebody of 37. I've done lots of different jobs, and ultimately all of those jobs kind of merged to create what I do now. But I think the fact that I've done all those jobs is a perfect sort of, I guess, synopsis of who Simon Bourne is. It's just somebody who kind of goes after things. No idea is too big. It's just like, right, I'm just doing it, and that's who I am.
I really like that. I wanted to ask about creativity. What does creativity mean to you? So you mentioned that you're a creative.
Yeah.
I always call myself a creative entrepreneur, and people are like, well, aren't you just an entrepreneur? And I always say, well, I am, but there's something about the creative part's really important to me because there isn't always the same funding or opportunities for creatives. And I think it's a really big part of my identity. So I'm curious about, what does creativity mean to you?
Yeah, I think the word entrepreneur kind of gets sort of assumed financial or business orientated, and I don't necessarily sort of agree with that. I think, you know, you are a creative entrepreneur because what you are doing is in every aspect of your life, from your dress to your work to your interior design. Like it is a creative entrepreneurial output, and just because necessarily these things don't make you money, it doesn't mean that it isn't part of that overall collective of entrepreneur. I think I'm kind of the same. Like, I'm a very expressive person, and that comes across in my work and in my clothes and in my haircuts, in my jewelry, in my sport, you know, when I play sport, and sort of analysing performance and things like that. So I think creative for me is all about output, and that's the word I used just a moment ago. So like, it's about what comes out of me as a human being, whether that is color, whether that is design, whether that is art. You know, it's an output.
Absolutely. I think creativity is a spectrum.
Yeah.
So we can all be creative in different ways, whether it's painting, singing, writing poems,
100%.
you know, collecting flowers and pressing them,
Yeah.
you know, making beautiful shoes.
And what's fascinating about creativity is that it displays itself in all manner of ways that, like, you know, my wife would not describe herself as creative. She's a midwife by trade. You know, that's a very logical job. It's a very scientific, medical job, you know, in terms of what she's doing. But yet she's constantly reinventing ways to improve her dialogue with women in labour, you know, and improve her communication skills with colleagues and sort of peers around her. And I think that in itself is a creative output, you know. So she wouldn't describe herself as creative, but I think we all have it. We all have this creative element, some more than others, some more theatrical than others. Certainly you and I think, are very in that theatrical element. But yeah, I think creativity is for me, it's the greatest trait of any human being.
Yeah, it's a very important value to me, and to the show. Actually, it's one of our core, you know, values. We say on Nurture Your Zest that through any adversity in life, you can find inspiration through courage, creativity, and curiosity to nurture your zest. So, you know, it's a big value of ours. I'm actually curious about something. So, creativity plus madness, or just the concept of people. If you look back through time, so when I was diagnosed with ADHD, it was quite a challenge for me in the beginning. And I was looking at famous people in the past who they believe had ADHD. So people like the character, the book character, Sherlock Holmes, was allegedly ADHD, right? That character. But also the one that I was wanting to mention there was actually Leonardo Da Vinci. Because he was notorious for starting projects and never finishing them, having a messy desk full of papers and diagrams and ideas. But one of the things that really shocked me was that so many of his ideas were so forward thinking that they wouldn't have been technologically possible with the technology at the time, right, until the 1900s. Right. So he was, you know, 5 centuries or whatever before his time. And that really felt empowering because it made me think of creativity in a different way, but also the way people come up with ideas. Sometimes it's about the skills we use and things like that. But I have also read a lot about this almost, there is this relationship between mental health and what may have been described as madness in the past and creativity. So I'm curious for you, in your creative journey, have you experienced times where you felt completely chaotic or things have felt difficult or just, you know, I don't even know what the correct term would be, but I like to call it, I love Lewis Carroll and I love Alice in Wonderland, but for me, I say I'm falling down the rabbit hole today, you know. Have you ever experienced that darkness that comes with creativity?
Course, yeah. So I think again, it's quite common in creative entrepreneurs in particular. I think there's evidence throughout, as you say, history of Vincent van Gogh. I think was another artist who suffered with or who is documented to have suffered with mental health issues. I think how I sum it up is when you are an entrepreneur and you are constantly sort of striving to make things better for your business, for your family, for your pocket, for your future, for your children, all this sort of stuff. You are constantly trying to you every single day you're just reviewing. You're reviewing. Is this room right? Is this setup right? Are my clothes right? Is my processes, are they correct? Is the supply chain correct? So you're constantly reviewing. So naturally, whenever you hit that kind of block of circumstance that no, that's not right, you kind of got that, you're automatically straight into that fight or flight mode. And I think, again, going back to creatives, I think creatives naturally, like, they do go left or they go right, rather than just kind of level in the middle. I think it takes a really disciplined and probably experienced entrepreneur to be able to just sit in the middle and just like try not to go left too far or try not to go right too far. And I think that's the thing is when you're faced with a challenge or some adversity in business or in just in your personal life, I think you naturally fall down the rabbit hole. And I think this, quite often, I think the very fact that we're sat here now talking about it, you get out of it and you climb back out, and then not only do you climb out the rabbit hole, but you might go up the tree as well. So I think that's almost the natural cycle of a creative entrepreneur, and I do find that Da Vinci, Van Gogh, Oscar Wilde, all these sort of historians that were incredible icons of the past. It's unsurprising actually that they did have these rabbit hole moments. So yeah.
Well, you've mentioned one of my favourite authors there, Oscar Wilde, and playwrights. I absolutely love his work, and he's been really important to me in finding my own voice, and I love a lot of his works. I'm curious about your influences then. What creatives inspire you?
Yeah, I'm not much of a celebrity kind of follower, and I'm not from one second suggesting Oscar Wilde as a celebrity. But what I tend not to do is I tend not to kind of just focus on a person in the past or something, and I do dip into people. So I love Elvis Presley. If you talk about artists and you talk about of his time, do you know what I mean? I love Elvis, and a lot of the musicians of the sort of 50s, 60s rock and roll period, so Buddy Holly, Eddie Cochran, Del Shannon, people like that, all really fascinating characters, and all with their own issues, as we all know. Elvis, Del Shannon, Buddy Holly, all went through their troubles, shall we say? And creatively, I suppose it's hard to pin down and say that is the person who I try to be like. I guess a more modern one, and I say it sort of through a gritted teeth because it is a little bit embarrassing, but I'm an honest person. I love David Beckham. I absolutely love David Beckham. I'm a massive football fan and grew up in the 90s and sort of the Manchester United dominant period, and watching him and Michael Owen and playing for England and things like that. But then outside of football, I really admire how he conducts himself and how he carries himself. And now, don't get me wrong, I'm not naive enough to think that there isn't a bit of a PR machine behind that. I'm sure there is. And I'm sure a lot of his decisions through life have been carefully decided or influenced by other people. But he's the man, he's the face of it, he's the one who's making the decision to say yes or no. And I think that, he is a royalist. He is somebody who cares about the country. He is somebody who backs the Olympics. He's somebody who, reduces himself to tears playing football, when he retired, and handing over the England captaincy and things like that. So he is somebody, I'd say, if you're looking for a role model in life, I wouldn't say it's not somebody I wake up every day and think I want to be like David Beckham, but I really admire him, and I think he's a fascinating character.
I think from the perspective of being self-made, and also, also from a class point of view,
Yeah,
he's really worked hard to um, be a leader in sport,
yeah.
someone that people can look up to,
I,
and
I
people
think, yeah,
do.
and the other part of it as well, sorry to interrupt, is like, this is a guy who wore a sarong on a beach. Now, am I sitting here saying I would wear a sarong on a beach? Absolutely not. But what I really admire about that is somebody who can just be themselves and like almost not care what the world thinks. And he's sort of done that throughout his entire life through haircuts and through jewelry, tattoos. He is an expressive individual, and I think that's the bit that like I really warm to, and I just think like I get a lot from that. Is that you just be who you are and just own your own skin and kind of put yourself out there. So yeah, it is a bit of a strange role model. I think probably I sort of do see it through a bit of gritted teeth, because I know there'll be a lot of people going bloody David Beckham, but like yeah, I think he's a great character, and I think he stands for a lot, and I think I do take a lot from him in terms of his individuality.
I love that, and I love that you own that, and he's great.
Yeah,
So I really like as well that he seems or appears to really love his kids, and
yeah,
that's a really nice thing,
yeah.
because often lots of people don't show
Yeah,
how much
that's it.
they
And I
love their
think in the
kids.
celebrity world, like obviously you can completely understand why in the world of fame, why people sort of hide their children and their family and protect them, and don't. But the Beckham family, they don't do that, and subsequently you now look at their children. I mean, they're going on to like have careers of their own now. Brooklyn's a great photographer. I mean, I sound like such a weirdo, don't I? Like, I know them all like personally. He's a great photographer. Romeo's playing football. So it's like. I think they are celebrities, absolutely. And I sort of opened this gambit by saying I don't like celebrities, or don't follow celebrities. I do think as a family, like I say, he represents everything that we all want to be. A bit vulnerable, honest, authentic. He's a decent guy. He's creative. He's a good footballer. He's a good family man. Like, what's there not to like?
I love that. So I'm curious about men's mental health. So you've talked there about authenticity, vulnerability, being yourself. How easy is it as a man to say how you feel and get emotional? And
Yeah, it's not easy. It's not easy. We live in a world still today, and it is improving, where men are very quickly judged on their emotions, and he cries too much, or he's too soft, or he's not tough enough, or and subsequently, if you are to express any kind of vulnerable side, I think there is this perception that you become less employable or less attractive, or less marketable, even. Less, your output is less. You're not as good as what you could be because you are emotional. And in fact, I remember in my previous job, so my last actually piece of employment, one of the big criticisms of me, and perhaps it was me taking it as a criticism, I don't know, but one of the big criticisms of me was I was too emotional. So I had a team of 6 or 7 people, and we were quite successful in the 2.5 years that I was there. We won some awards with the company. Our sales were good, and we were flogging furniture, selling furniture. That's what we were doing. So my job was the manager. I had a team of 5 to 6 people underneath me, and I would get quite hung up around this person's doing that. So what can we do about it? And then I would get very frustrated if I thought that the action wasn't appropriate, or if it wasn't supportive enough, or if it wasn't hard enough. So it goes both ways. And yeah, like I would quite regularly be told from my sort of seniors that I was being too emotive. But yet, for me, it was the emotion that was making us so successful, because it was that emotion that was getting the message across to the guys on an overall basis that we needed to achieve X, Y, or Z. So it was the emotion that was enabling customers to relate to me and my team, and to say, yeah, actually, we want to buy this furniture from you because you are emotive human beings, and let's face it, we all are human beings. So like, if you can connect with somebody on an emotional level, then you've got half a chance of selling something for a start. So yeah, and I've kind of just carried that forward. That's who I am as a natural person. But when I started the business and I started to become self-employed, I continued that story and continued that journey, and yeah, it helps.
I'm really interested in what you said there about emotionality, but also you described yourself as quite masculine, quite dominant in many ways in your life. So it's it's interesting that, you can be masculine and emotional. Or for instance, what I'm finding is I would say I'm a very feminine person, but actually in many ways I can be quite aggressive with my following my dreams. I haven't always felt like I've fitted in. So sometimes I've created my own box.
Yeah.
I used to try and find a seat at the table, prove my worth. And now I'm like, well, I actually don't want to do that anymore. If you want to work with me, come on over here. This is where the party's at. But
Yeah.
it's a different energy. And I think that it's so interesting that we are more than just masculine or feminine stereotypes or creative or not creative, or particular labels that people develop and create. And I'm really loving, I love your content anyway, but just the honesty, the transparency, the authenticity, and the vulnerability. I think that's really important. And I hope to see that for more men, because, I look sometimes at the stats recently, male suicide and some of the things that I'm reading around how difficult it is for men at times to explore their vulnerability. Loneliness is a huge issue for men, and there's always that thing about reaching out and asking for help and actually not realizing that so many of their peers or their friends are actually having a rough time too.
I think you're absolutely right. I think men generally just don't do it. They just don't reach out. And I think what's helped me hugely with recovering from my difficulties, and so when I say difficulties, I mean what we've just talked about. I've spent at least 2 occasions on my life where I've wanted to die, and both occasions were obviously very traumatic and incredibly tough. And I still sort of sit here now knowing I know that I wouldn't have. Or I would have, who knows what would have happened, but I would have struggled. I believe I would have struggled to kind of come out of that without the help and support of family, but then not also complete strangers, And so, in owning my story and kind of just being honest and authentic and just putting it out there that this is the reality, this is how I feel, this is what I'm going through and what I'm not going through, then it becomes my reality, and then it enables me to kind of to listen and to deal with it rather than just sort of hiding behind it. So, I think I've been very vocal recently over the last year, as a consequence of COVID and inexperience, business ownership. So like making wrong decisions or poor decisions, I think, throughout the pandemic. I lost my business in January, and then I had to file for bankruptcy on a personal level due to debts that were secured against me as a director. Now, obviously, that in itself is just the most, like, I just can't imagine there were many more painful things. I wasn't losing a business because I'd failed. I was losing a business because it had just gone wrong and it had just gone pear-shaped, and I was just gutted. I was absolutely devastated, and subsequently, obviously, my mental health just completely collapsed. What am I supposed to do? How do I go and get a job and supposedly enjoy it? How do I sit with my wife and enjoy her company? How do I enjoy my children? Because my business is my identity. It's the thing that I sit on this sofa for. It's like, it's my baby, and it's it's tattooed on my arm. It's everything to me, and it was gone, and that was just incredibly tough. So for me to go through that, to have a mental health collapse, to find myself suicidal on 2 occasions without the support and the love that I received firstly from my family, and then secondly from strangers on social media, and who now know when I sort of made the decision to come out as a bankrupt, for want of a better word. They now know I then owned it, and now all of a sudden, nothing. There was no secret. I'm not carrying this weight and this weight of failure around anymore. So for me, people, and listen, when you're in the rabbit hole, everybody will say things like, you need to be honest, you need to be open, you need to talk, you need to reach out and all this sort of stuff. It's the last thing you want to do. It's the last thing you want to do is talk to anybody about how you're feeling, because I don't want to be a sad sap. I don't want to be a misery on somebody or a burden. But the way it worked for me was to reach out to select people, a couple of good friends, a couple of business associates that I would definitely class as friends, but who I know because of the business, and subsequently then like I say, the wider public, and I just put it out on social media that I'd lost the business and I was bankrupt and I'd been through a mental health collapse, but I'm coming back. And I think that's the trick as well, is like, you've got to turn it into some sort of positivity, so like, it's not, nobody wants a sob story. People want positivity. Do you know what I mean? And I think that, in your worst points, you can declare that you are vulnerable and you need help, but then make sure that when you are coming back, don't forget the people that got you there, and that's why I tell my story publicly.
So it's really powerful what you're talking about there, Simon, and it sounds like a really difficult time. I actually wanted to ask you about the concept of worthiness and shame around mental health, around bankruptcy, around some of the stuff you've been going through, feeling suicidal. One of the things that I believe, and I say often, is that secrets have power. So as someone who's a survivor of assault and sexual assault, I used to keep that to myself and keep it a secret, and I felt so unworthy. However, over time, that secret just became more close to my chest, and I just felt this separation between what was me and what was the real me. It was like I was a porcelain doll, fragile, but no one could really see the me inside that was screaming.
Yeah, I totally get that, because I think a lot of what you're talking about, and I think what's happened to me is a bit of natural life cycle. You kind of reach your 30s, and the things that mattered in your 20s are kind of less important. You have children, you get married, you buy a house and things like that. So it's like, your natural lifestyle, you become more mature, more aware, you question things, and all of this stuff. So it kind of naturally happens, I think, in some ways. And just what you're talking about, and it's obviously nowhere near as sort of traumatic as what you're talking about, but I've been quite vocal and open about the fact that I'd say from the age of teenager, 12, 13 years old, up until probably about 30 years old, everybody would look at me and would think that I am the life and soul of a party. I'm so expressive, and was regularly asked if I was gay, and that all that stuff, because I'm so expressive with like hats and with funky glasses or fashion that nobody else would really wear. I would buy the last stuff off the sale rail because nobody else wanted that. You know what I mean? So I would want it and then make something out of it. And that sort of creative output in itself comes with lots of stereotypes. But up until sort of, I think around the age of 30, I think the thing that I was hiding was just I was completely miserable in my own skin, really. I didn't like employment. I didn't like any of the jobs that I was doing. I was always searching for something outside of work to satisfy me in terms of that creative output. So I was working in like admin and just any old job really that I could kind of get. And then, like I say, the reason it kind of, as you get older, because you find your box that you're supposed to be in that sense. So like mine started with like marketing, and then journalism and photography and all these sorts of artistic kind of things. And so then I started to find my identity and just go, well, that's who I am. I am just an expressive guy, and just because I'm expressive doesn't have to mean anything other than I'm expressive, and that's my personality. And I think going back to what you're saying about labels and around, people sort of putting you in the box. I think if you get in your own box, that's okay because you're owning your box. But if other people put you in it, then that's quite dangerous for you and your self-esteem and confidence and things like that. So yeah, I think, teenage years are very tough anyway. Early 20s, I really felt that early 20s, late 20s, sort of like, why am I here? What am I doing? Like, I hate everybody. I'm grumpy and, I'm not happy. And then, like I say, once I found the business and I found my children and I got married, and like I started to sort of just accept who I was, and that for me felt liberating. It was kind of like, okay, like I don't have to worry that if somebody thinks I might be gay or whatever, it doesn't matter. Like, it really doesn't matter. So like, as long as I'm happy, that's what I'm gonna do. So, and now I do that. So yeah.
So you could almost put all of that shame and all of that stuff, all of the labels,
Exactly.
all of the things that other people
The worthiness, the shit. It was all just like, well, that's on you. That's not on me. That's not on me. Like, I'm happy. I'm all right. I'm comfortable in my own skin. I'm all right having a stupid hat on or long hair or earrings or, I'm all right with all that. So like, I'm comfortable with it. Actually, it's quite rewarding for me because I stand out in a crowd, and from a business point of view, that's helpful. So I just embrace it and I use it to my advantage, and I think that the more people can do that, actually, from a mental health perspective, the healthier the world would be.
Perfect. So I have a question. Men's fashion.
Yeah.
I mean, look at you. You are fabulous to observe. You've got 5 hats, got really cool earrings, tattoos, corduroys. You've got fabulous shoes. We're going to hear more about your shoes in a moment. But what do you think about fashion?
Yeah, I think what I love about fashion is it's a person's ability to sort of really showcase who they are without saying anything. So, everybody sort of knows about body language and the art of communication, things like that. But we're all the same. We're all guilty of it, of making a judgment on somebody based on their image, because we don't know this person. We're just walking down the street and you see somebody coming towards you and you think, that's a cool person, or that's a boring person, or that's somebody who is married, that's somebody who's not happy in a relationship, that's somebody who is happy in a relationship. That's, I don't know, maybe that's just me. I don't know. I think that fashion for me it's a way of expressing who you are as an individual. And I think certainly with my own fashion, and I talk from my own thing, my fashion and clothes is very much an expression of how I am on that day. So like, if you saw me walking down the street in a scruffy pair of shorts, a pair of Crocs, I do have some, and, beard looking a bit scruffy, I think that's a very indicative way of telling how I'm feeling at that moment. And I think this whole cycle of recovery from bankruptcy and recovery from everything that sort of happened this last year is still evolving with my fashion, and that's the way I look at it with fashion. It's just it's part of an identity. It's like it's that output.
I love that you are exploring and reinventing yourself and just kind of riding the waves. Some of them sound like they've been pretty confronting, and then at other times they've been a bit more peaceful, or you've had the space or the emotional energy to do something differently that day. Got these fabulous shoes on the table, so can you tell us about these wonderful shoes?
Yeah, so I've brought a couple just to sort of showcase a little bit about what we're about. So the Hand-Dyed Shoe Company is everything that I've kind of summed up in this entire podcast, really. It's about expression, individuality, creativity. It was born out of scrap leather from the furniture manufacturing job where I used to work when we talked about the sofa at the beginning. And the scrap leather was kind of getting thrown away, and I would initially take it home and make it into a keyring or a wallet or a belt or something sort of leathery, bookmark, phone cases. And I would dye this leather whatever colour the customer had asked for, or just might not even have a customer. I might just be making it for myself. And then I started to think a little bit more about like, well, this is quite cool. The leather's lovely. The furniture we make is incredible. What other products are made from leather? And obviously one of those things was shoes. But the idea of sort of making, I don't know, a minimum order quantity of like 5,000 pairs or whatever a factory might want to produce, what was going on in my head, and the finance that was going to be required to do that, didn't really float my boat. So I thought, well, let's just do it like one of one, where the customer can choose what they want, and they can have purple, red, tan, mustard, black, grey, brown, whatever. And it was really all this sort of, and then I can help them and I can guide them through it, and I can tell them about the shoes, and I can learn about the leather, and I can learn about the heels, and I can learn about the craft of making a pair of shoes, combined with the art of hand dyed and what that really means, combined with my history in photography and journalism and marketing and things like that. And ultimately we could create a business out of this. And that's where it came from, and I absolutely love what we do. It'll never be a £50 million a year turnover company because we make one pair at a time and it's a complete one-off thing. However, what we are outputting is, hundreds, hopefully soon thousands of men a year that are expressing themselves in the creativity of their shoes, and that's what they are. They are an extension of who you are as an individual, and whether that's a plain pair of well-fitted calfskin black brogues, or whether it's a multicoloured oxblood, mustard, crocodile skin monk strap, that's what I'm into. So it's it's not about what it is, it's about what it means to you as an individual, and sort of how tall you stand in them shoes.
Oh, I love all of what you're saying. And I do want to point out as well that it's not just for men, it's for women too.
Yes.
So for instance, it's really lovely that you do these commissions, because it means people get to have something really unique.
Yeah.
I know I have my heart set on 2 pairs of shoes, a pair of sort of vintage Abigail style boots, probably fuchsia, and some green brogues.
Amazing.
I love anything wacky, so yeah. I'm saving up for that at the moment.
So this is it, you see. So like, it's the creativity in it. We could create you both of those shoes, and where else are you going to find a green pair of brogues that might have some embossing in it, or a fuchsia pair of boots? It's just, you're going to be looking forever. We can make them for you, and not only can we make them, but they'll be yours and only yours. You won't see another person wearing them, and for me that just gives me so much joy. It's like, it's not a pair of shoes, it's an extension of who you are, and that is so important to me.
It sounds so exciting. So I'm really keen to hear more about your story, but I'm also conscious of time, because you mentioned creative outputs, and we are actually need to go and write our books. We've got a writing club where we are writing our books
Day
together.
one. Day one of writing club, yeah.
So that will be our creative output for today, as well as a podcast. So that's a bit of material there we can work with.
Absolutely.
But I wanted to see, before we kind of wrap up, what, you mentioned some really tough stuff today, and you've been through a lot recently. If anyone is watching or listening and feeling really stuck at the moment, what were the things that kind of got you out of bed? How did you cope? And what tips would you have for someone to help themselves? I
think at the time, it was incredibly hard to get out of bed, and there were times where I didn't get out of bed. There were times when I can really vividly remember this story of opening the curtains, and it was around October, November time last year, and we've got a lovely big oak tree outside of our bedroom window, and it was absolutely golden, golden leaves on it, and they were just starting to drop, and you could see all the chestnuts and things like that, and it was stunning. And the tree made me feel sick. Like, I couldn't stare at it, I couldn't look at it, because I felt like, going back to what I was saying before, I wasn't worthy, I didn't deserve to look at this tree, because I was a bankrupt, and I was a failure, and my business had collapsed, and the floorboards that I stand on are fraudulent, because I've messed up. Do you know what I mean? So as an individual, I was just at that point, just completely gone. You know, my brain was completely shattered and exhausted, and I felt completely unworthy of having a wife, let alone running a business. So, you know, my only choice at that moment really was to carry on, because the only other choice was not worth thinking about, you know. So to carry on, what did that mean? So to carry on meant that I had to live that day, and I had to find the end of that day somehow. And, you know, from a moment of opening the curtains and seeing a tree that you can't look at to going to bed at night is a long time. There's a long period in the middle of that you need to fill. And the only way I could fill it really was to just crack on and just to do what I do. And if that one thing meant I must go to the shop today to buy a tin of peas, so that we've got a tin of peas for tea, then that was my target. That was my goal. That was my one thing, is I'm going to go and get a tin of peas. And if I got the tin of peas, I put it on the bench, the kitchen bench, I've done what I set out to do today. And that one little thing was an achievement. And then day 2 came, and then, you know, you're going to buy 2 tins of peas today. Do you know what I mean? So it's like, it was about just evolving through it, and eventually I found myself, and, you know, I mean, on January the 6th this year, I sat in my first meeting with an insolvency practice to talk about the liquidation of my business. One of the hardest things I've ever had to talk about, because the liquidation of my business for me was the liquidation of me. It was the liquidation of, not I don't mean financially, I mean liquidation as in like me just falling through the cracks in the ground and, you know, not existing anymore. You know, by April I was bankrupt, and by what month we are now? July. By July I'm sitting on a couch talking about it. So like, yeah, these roads of recovery are long. Mine really, I think, has been quite short compared to what other people's roads to recovery are from trauma, I guess. But, you know, one step in front of the other. It's just a case of one day in front of the other. Keep going. Keep pushing. And I hear all these words all the time, you know, in the moment, and I find them very diluted, and they don't really mean anything. You know, I watch Tyson Fury a lot, and sort of his troubles and wars, and at the time I'm like watching it going, yeah, it's easy for you to say this, that and the other, but then now I can watch it in a sort of a more open way, I guess, and I feel empowered by it. So, you know, anybody who's listening to this now, it might not feel relevant, but hopefully, you know, when you do recover, and hopefully you might remember this and think this, that it was useful. So
thank you. That's really powerful. I'm so grateful for you being on the show today. There's one question I have to ask, which I ask everyone, which is, what is your number one word to nurture your zest? This question always gets people off guard.
Nurture my zest.
I like to say that it's the thing that gets you out of bed in the morning, the thing that just energizes you, the thing, you know, the thing that just makes you feel your truest version of yourself, the thing that connects you with all of your dreams, and you know, and I love the answers we get, because we get such fascinating ones.
I think it's just honesty. I think it's the word honesty, and the reason I say that is just because that's the thing that empowers me. It's like, nothing can touch you when you're honest. Nothing can touch you, because when you're honest, nobody can tell me anything I don't know about myself. You know, because and if somebody does, then embrace it, and that becomes, as long as it was honest, you know. And it's just like, yeah, for me, honesty, I think, is the reason I get out of bed, and I enjoy living a really authentic, honest life, you know. And there's no secrets.
Thank you so much. Really, really powerful stuff. And we will include all your links of how to contact you.
Thank you.
Buy your shoes.
Yes, that would be nice.
Yes, we'd like some more shoe sales.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome.
And we better get writing.
Let's get writing.
You've been listening to Nurture Your Zest. You can find us online on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn at Nurture Your Zest. If you've liked today, please subscribe. You can also leave us a review if you're feeling extra kind. Today's podcast has been made available through the kind sponsorship of Nat Branding Company. We look forward to catching up with you again soon as you learn to nurture your zest.